Good morning. I'm Simon Clarke from American Lithium. I've just been at the one-to-one conference in London, and great opportunity to catch up with Matt.
It is. Welcome home to your homeland.
Yes. The roots. It's doing so well right now.
You're right. I think I might follow you and leave myself. But anyway, You actually said you're over here at the conference, one-to-one conference, meeting what sort of investors?
Mainly, I'd say there's a lot of strategic interest. I'd say right now in the lithium markets, really more on the strategic side. A lot of family office representatives there as well. Good. Families looking to get positioned in this sector. I think, they see what's happening in the world. They see what's happening with the sector, and it's now come down from the main institutions to family offices and other investors who all recognize that this is probably one of the sectors to be in going forward.
So you're talking about the lithium there, but you've got this uranium thing. Are they catching on to that change of narrative?
Yeah, there's some that are really focused on uranium. Most like both. And then there are some that are real uranium bugs. So, they see that. Obviously, I think people know that we're going to be doing something with Macusani in the coming months. Yeah. And, the ability to be a part of that definitely drives some of the meetings.
So we talked last time out when we caught up about the uranium and the potential of a spin out and what that would do for your existing shareholders, etc. Has that moved along any, or is it a case of let's time the market here?
There's a little bit of time in the market, but there's also quite a lot of prep work you have to do for it. Tax structuring, structuring in general, the actual physical moving concessions, and we've got 168 concessions in Peru. Which one's uranium, which one's lithium? Right. There's different fees associated, whether it's metal or non-metal. So there's a process. So we've got ourselves in position, and I think we'll be ready to do something on it in the coming months here. Really, as you say, it's probably as we move into Christmas, not the time. But very much looking to time the market somewhat. I mean, you can never be absolutely perfect on that, but I do sense that every day goes by, there's more and more interest in uranium.
Do you feel that has been factored into your value now, or fully factored into your value now, or is there a bit more to come?
No, I don't. If you look at the street, our average NAV, I think, of the analysts that cover us, about 2.3 billion.
Right. Where are we at today?
We're about 410 market cap or something.
Right.
So we suffer the biggest discount, I think, of any company in our peer group, which, is probably to do with the large retail base we originally had.
Right.
When markets are tough.
There's also, you've got multiple, projects too. Well, so it's a little bit harder to understand. And I guess the spin out will kind of simplify the message somewhat.
Absolutely. I mean, it will simplify the message. I would say we get no value for uranium. It's hidden. We have two large lithium projects that we focus on. Yeah. It's not that we don't like the uranium. We really like the uranium, but clearly putting it in its own vehicle, being able to drive ahead. What is, 125 million pound resource. It's a big resource. It's going to get bigger. What's some of the best OPEX out there in terms, outside of Kazakhstan? Yeah. And lots of milestones on it. So, it makes sense for it to do it in its own vehicle rather than, hidden in our portfolio.
And just remind me, you're looking to set up with its own management team as well.
I think that's where we'll go. I mean, we've not formally, pulled the trigger on exactly what we would do, but to us, I think shareholders will want to have the opportunity to participate in the upside. So I think doing some kind of spin out into a new, into a listed vehicle that then has an independent board. I mean, there will be cross-operational teams, that kind of stuff, because we do the work on it right now, and our operational teams in Peru know the asset better than anyone.
And I can't imagine Lawrence wanting to let go of his little baby. So
he'll want to, he'll probably be on the board or something like that. Yeah. But it will be an independent company, an independent board.
And the reason I ask is because seeing a lot of new entrants into the uranium space, and they're picking up old projects, dusting them down, and hoping to get some market action going there without necessarily having ever done it, but done anything in uranium before. Lawrence obviously been around the block, he understands those projects technically and otherwise. It's important to get the right team operationally and the right team in terms of the board, because they'll need to raise some capital.
Yep.
They need to manage that whole process, and technically they need to look like they're not just one of these opportunistic jump on the bandwagon type of companies.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, fully agree. So, we won't lose the technical knowledge that is there already with the team that we have.
Right.
There will be, as I say, some cross-fertilization, but obviously we'll bring in some strong independent board members, and some strong independent management as well.
Right. And the reason I ask that, because I'm trying to work out what's the play here. Because if I'm an existing shareholder, I'll get the benefit of that. But do I hold or do I flip it out? Because that's probably the best it's ever going to be.
So, it'll be spun out at a reasonable valuation. I mean, you have to figure out what that is. You don't want it too high. You trigger tax consequences.
True.
And if you think about it from a American Lithium shareholder, you don't really care what the value is, because you're going to get your prorated entitlement. And so we'll put it in at what I think will be a really attractive valuation. And then I think, once it's trading in its own market, it'll then start to trade more off the NPV and the PEA, and obviously the drilling and restating PEAs and the work we do. So I think most people will recognize that there's a lot of value creation. I mean, as I say, I think most analysts have it at about 300 million valuation in that 2.3 million NAV. But we don't see it. I mean, we have a $600 million NAV in the last PEA, and most uranium developers trade in and around 0.5 times. So we don't see any of that value. Now, yes, there's the dispute with the 32 concessions that impacts about 30% of the overall resource. We're in Peru. It's not been fully developed yet, so there's a number of discount factors. But I think most people recognize that if you look at it, it's got real fundamentals. It's a big resource, and it's very, 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 very low acid costs. Op cost at $17 a pound puts it right up there with some of the best projects globally. So
it definitely does.
But it's not going to realize that value until it's in its own vehicle,
right?
Trading.
So you're going through a process there. I guess come the new year, a few more things will have settled in terms of whether it be around the licenses or all the administrative elements that you're going to have to go through. So are we at Q1? Is it in our heads? Are we thinking?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. That's very. I think it's at the point now where we've done a lot of the work, and it makes sense. Doesn't make sense to sit around on it. It makes sense to pull the trigger. Allows them, a junior with 3 big projects, that's a lot to handle. So even just from that perspective, having it in its own vehicle and allowing us to focus on the 2
it's not just a story,
development stage, it'll be a lot cleaner as well.
No, that makes a lot of sense for everyone concerned there. Okay, so let's park that back up. Can I talk about the lithium market though? Because it's been on a rip. Lithium prices have been on a rip, I should say. Equities, not so much. And by the way, thank you, Goldman's. They put out a report that was counter to what most of the industry players are thinking. So that's obviously affected equities a little bit, I think, fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think Goldman is still a very powerful name on Wall Street.
Absolutely.
I have no idea what their rationale or their reasons that are driving it, but they certainly seem to be on, they're in a boat by themselves, if you like. I mean, I think every other investment bank, every other industry analyst, even I was at the LA benchmark conference last week, and I'd say there was a fair amount of consternation when they came out with that. I mean, you're talking about a conference where the headline number was, if we're going to get to net zero in the world, you're going to need an installed base of lithium-ion batteries of 300 terawatt hours. I think today we're at 600 gigawatt hours.
Wow.
So you're going to need to ramp up by the end of this decade to 20 terawatt hours of lithium-ion batteries going into the world every year. So that's staggering numbers. And
Yeah.
Even for next year, most analysts are saying we're going to need a million tons of lithium carbonate equivalent. This year, what are we at? 400,000 or 500,000.
Yeah.
And you just being able to scale up that quickly and bring on production that quickly. I mean, no one but Goldman seems to be thinking that that's doable in those timelines. So, I mean, the other big message that I took from that conference is you've got all of the big auto manufacturers there, you've got all the OEMs, they're now very much looking more and more going upstream, and they're not talking about demand destruction, they're talking about demand deferral. Because they're saying they've all bet the farm on electric vehicles. Yep. So they can't go back.
Yep.
So they, if they can't get the cars out in time, that demand's not going to go away. It's just going to get pushed out.
Yep.
And I think you're starting to see that already. So I think there's a wave of demand coming, and there's definitely some supply coming on, but it always takes longer, always costs more.
I find it sort of extraordinary. That's how many terawatts? 30.
300.
300. Oh my. Right.
That'll be the installed base by 2050 to get to net zero.
I kind of, that's overwhelming. It feels like overwhelming because when I sort of sit and talk to companies about how long projects take to, make a discovery through to production and all the kind of technical, especially with lithium, it's like all the technical machinations there, you can't shortcut that process. It doesn't feel doable.
Well, I think you can with the right steps, and I think there's now finally talk in the US of short-circuiting permitting.
Okay.
You take our projects, Falchani. If it wasn't for COVID, and some government changes recently that have slowed things on the ground, that project should be well through feasibility. It's got lots of drill control, it's got masses of met work, and we've got a healthy balance sheet, so we can move it forward as quickly as we can. But it's one that if you threw money at it, and you had all the governmental pieces in place as well, you could definitely fast track that. I think you could go to a pilot, and then straight into bankable feasibility. So I think there are projects that can be fast tracked. I mean, the US, it's well known that the current permitting system, it's not necessarily that it's bad, it's just that it's very linear.
Yeah.
If you look at Australia and parts of some of the jurisdictions in Canada, they've got very strong mining codes. They protect the environment, but it's way more efficient and way faster.
Right.
And so I think there are things we can do, Matt. I recognize that you still have to prove it. You have to find a deposit. You have to prove you can extract economically. You then have to, show that it is a feasible project, and then raise your capital and build a mine. So you can only short circuit that to some extent, but I do think there are steps you can do.
We've talked a little bit about valuation, certainly on the uranium side of things. Do you feel that actually there's a sort of slight reset in the market? It's been a sort of interesting few months for most companies. Do you think it's actually probably done you a bit of a favor in the sense that because your expectation was big, lithium prices were ripping. You were $1 billion company at one point, right? And did it feel like the market was slightly getting ahead of itself? And that's it can be a good thing if you're raising capital, but it can also be a weight on your shoulders because it's all about backfilling that valuation.
Yeah, I take that point. It's a tough one because for us, there's a number of corporate steps that I think having a higher stock price do help you at.
Sure.
But in general, it does take the spotlight off you a little bit, and it allows you to really go in and focus on on the business. And as we discussed back in September, I would submit that American Lithium's a lot stronger company today than it was 12 months ago, and yet our valuation's a third of what it is. So I think it's a great time for people looking to buy. I'm still not sure. I think there's a lot of cash there and a lot of people watching and sitting on the sidelines, and I do think that's going to come in at some point. I just don't know when. But it has in a sense allowed us to really try and focus on how we can drive these projects forward.
Right.
given all the circumstances that we operate in.
Okay, so given you're kind of cleaning up the portfolio, as it were,
yeah,
going to create some value with one of those. You talked about potentially maybe being able to kind of shortcut the process, speed things up. Has the order of play in your mind changed as you learn more about the other projects?
I think what dictates the other projects is how quickly we can get approvals in Peru, how quickly you can get things permitted in.
How are things in Peru? Let's talk Peru for a second. Because it's had a bad stick at the beginning of the year.
Peru, it's just been, for us, it's been difficult. We've got a government that is, on the face of it, very supportive of what we're doing, and yet, we still don't have our drill permits that we thought we'd have a year ago. I think the team down there has reacted extremely well in terms of they've moved forward what we can. We launched our EIA down there, which puts the project into feasibility, but it also allowed us to do some drilling. So we're back at Falchani drilling. So even though the main permit hasn't been granted yet to do a bunch more exploration type drilling, we're doing some good infill and extension drilling in and around Falchani.
Okay.
And so, we can move that ahead. Now that is to support the EIA, but it also gives us greater understanding of the deposit. We're also doing great work with ANSTO. I mean, as you know, we believe ANSTO is the best lab in the world. They've been doing lithium for 20 years. We've used labs in the US and not knocking them. They're decent, but no one has the full range of knowledge on hard rock, on brines, on clay stones as ANSTO does. So, and they were delayed. They had big issues with COVID. And so it took them, I would say, until the middle of this year to get ramped back up. But we believe it was definitely the right thing to stay with them. And since then, not only have they been doing great work on the met side at TLC, which has really helped us understand that mineralization, but they've also, we've shown that we can add an SOP circuit at Falchani, and we're in the process of doing that with cesium. So we're moving forward strongly on the met side. We are drilling. We will be building the resource, reclassifying the resource. So we're making good progress. So the government hasn't prevented that. It just hasn't helped it.
Right.
And, and I was very hopeful with a lot of the rhetoric that was coming out of the government that we were actually going to get some proactive help. But, I think the main thing for us in Peru, we're making progress. We continue to have incredibly strong support from our communities who are great. They're really, we've got 6 communities around the plateau. They're very engaged, very helpful. They put their own pressure on the government to help us move this project forward. And there's no reason they shouldn't. It's just, I think you have a government situation there, and it's not for us to talk about politics, but I think the government today, because they're dealing with a centre-right parliament and they're kind of clinging to power, it's difficult for them to do much more than actually survive day to day.
Right, okay. But looking forward, for me, obviously, the immediate quick win is obviously the spin-out, great. You've mentioned a few things that you're targeting doing, so it sounds like there's a bunch of things on the list which you expect to knock out in 2023. Yep. So catalyst, which used to mean something. So for 2022, didn't get the memo because where people have been delivering things and not getting the kind of credit or the value they expected. 2023, you just come back from LA, message from industry is what?
I mean, the message from industry is, we've got to get these projects permitted and built as quickly as we can. And, I think there's a big job to be done. But I think we can do it. I mean, as I've said before, I think it's going to take not only the US domestic, it's going to take all the, what I would term allied companies like, Peru has historically been, Europe, Korea, Japan, and I'm not talking just about the assets, I'm talking about the actual knowledge base of, of building lithium ion infrastructure and lithium ion batteries, soup to nuts. I mean, the tech, and I was quoted because I was on CNBC earlier in the week, and I was quoted for for saying that the Chinese have done an excellent job, but they have. I mean, those guys, they were way ahead of everyone else. They understand the business. They understand everything soup to nuts. We don't have that knowledge base in the US. We don't necessarily have it all in Europe. But if we pull all of our forces together, we do, and we've got a lot of assets. Domestic supply in the US is never, I don't think, going to fill the need. So it's got to be everyone pulling together.
That's a good point you make.
And I think Peru, we believe that the assets down there can be a huge piece of that supply chain as well.
Because part of the big problem, as he's articulated, is the fact that it's not just like, oh, I've got an asset and I'll be pumping out lithium. It's everything all the way down through to the battery manufacturer.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of pieces in there which need to kind of come together in one supply chain.
Yeah.
And it's just not.
Well, it's why we use ANSTO.
Yeah.
I mean, people say they're in Australia.
Yeah.
But they've got 20 years experience of, first of all, hard rock, then the brines developed, now the claystones developed. So if you want someone to put a flow sheet together and tell you how you should process someone, I don't think there's anyone better in the world. And as I say, it did cause us some delays, but you know, you talk about milestones. We're very close on our PEA at TLC. It's taken longer, I think, than a lot of people would necessarily have liked. But we've had those delays, and what it has done, and again, being out of the spotlight on the share price, is it's allowed us to really focus on the mineralization. It's complicated. I mean, lithium's complicated. Claystones are, you know, they've got a lot of good attributes, but they're a complicated form of mineralization. And I believe, you know, the PA will show a very robust approach to extracting and making good money at doing so.
Well, look, I'm looking forward to seeing some of these deliverables next year for you. 2023 sounds like there's a lot happening.
Yeah.
And I think possibly will give you a better justification for the sorts of values that you were at earlier in the year.
Sure.
And there'll be something, some backbone behind it, some real meaning behind that.
Yeah.
As I suspect, it's going to be an exciting lithium market and uranium market for 2023.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
So,
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
Always good.